Your wife divorced you while you were still in a coma.
He woke to a world that had moved on without him. The blinding hospital lights, the cold sheets, the ache in his bones, none of it compared to the sentence the doctor delivered with a steady, unblinking calm. Your wife divorced you while you were still in a coma. The words hit harder than the crash that nearly killed him. How could someone sign away a marriage while the other lay fighting for life? Why did no one question it? And why did every nurse avoid his eyes when he asked what else happened during those lost months? Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and as he struggled to breathe through the betrayal, one truth became unmistakable. The accident wasn't the real beginning. It was the cover. A much bigger story was waiting in the shadows. He had always believed life was built, not gifted. Every day, every late night in the office, every blueprint drawn under flickering desk lamps, Aaron Cole thought all of it was an investment in a future he and his wife, Lila, would share. Even now, as he sat silently in the hospital bed, struggling to understand how everything had unraveled, his mind kept drifting back to the days before the crash, back to the life that looked solid from the outside but was already cracking beneath the surface. The memory came slowly, like a camera lens sharpening after a long blur. Ravensbrook had been his sanctuary, a city of steel, glass, and ambition. From the balcony of their townhouse, he used to watch the skyline glow at dusk, believing the world was finally beginning to make space for him. He remembered the warmth in his chest each time he unlocked their front door after work, imagining Lila waiting inside. For years, that thought alone kept him going, but beneath that image was something else, something colder. He had sensed it before he understood it, the way Lila's sighs had deepened, the way her smiles had become performative bright for others, thin for him. She had once traced circles on his palm when they talked about dreams and children. Lately, she barely touched him at all, yet he brushed it away then. He always brushed things away. There was a night burned into his memory with painful clarity. Rain tapped on their windows like impatient fingers. Lila stood in the kitchen, wearing a crimson silk robe that shimmered under the warm lights. She should have looked beautiful, but all Aaron noticed was the way she avoided his eyes while scrolling through her phone. "You're late again," she muttered, not quite hiding the irritation in her voice. "I told you," he said gently. The firm needed the final revisions on the Halden Tower project. The deadline moved up. She scoffed softly. Deadlines always move up. Plans always fall apart. And somehow it's always your responsibility to fix everything. The bitter sting in her tone lingered long after she walked away. He remembered just standing there, dripping rainwater on the floor, unable to figure out when her disappointment had become so constant. But then she said something that clawed at him even now. Other men manage to earn more, work less, and still give their wives the life they deserve. He hadn't known how to respond. All he did was apologize like he always did, while swallowing the quiet fear that he was becoming a burden rather than a partner. He tried to make sense of it back then. Lila's older sister, Noreen. He had been in her ear, constantly glittering jewelry, designer clothes, in dripping wealth at every brunch. She never bothered hiding her disdain for Aaron's modest salary or his long hours. "Vision is great," she once told Lila in a not-so-private whisper, "but stability pays the bills. You can't build a future on potential." Maybe that was the night everything truly began to break. At work, the air wasn't much lighter. Pressure thickened with every project deadline, every investor meeting. That was when Marcus Hale came into sharper focus, a colleague with a golden smile and a talent for making difficult situations look effortless. He had the kind of confidence that wrapped itself around a room, and people gravitated toward him. Aaron admired him in a distant, cautious way. Marcus, unlike Aaron, didn't wear the weight of expectations. He joked his way through meetings, always seemed to get the better clients, and had a habit of strolling past Aaron's desk with a pat on the shoulder. "How's the grind treating you, Cole?" he'd tease. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." Aaron always laughed it off. But what he didn't miss, what he never allowed himself to dwell on, was the way Marcus occasionally glanced at Lila during firm gatherings. The look was quick, unreadable, but there, and the strange, breathless pause Lila made before greeting him never escaped Aaron's attention. It should have been a warning. Instead, he told himself he was imagining things. One Friday, Marcus approached him with an opportunity. "The CEO wants us to pitch the new sustainability model Monday morning," he said. "We could land the firm's biggest contract of the year, but we'll need to go over the plans tonight." Late, the offer glowed like a promise of redemption. If Aaron secured that deal, maybe Lila would believe in him again. Maybe she would stop comparing their life to everyone else's. Maybe she would smile the way she used to. He rushed home to tell her, expecting pride or at least support. Instead, she folded her arms and arched a brow. "So, you're leaving again tonight? It's a big break," he explained. "If this works out, it'll put us in a better place, financially." "There it is again later," she muttered. "Everything with you is about later." A silence settled between them, thick and suffocating. He wanted to reach for her, but she stepped away, as if his touch might stain her robe. She didn't look at him when he left the house. She didn't kiss him goodbye. That should have hurt more. But Aaron was too focused on hope, on clawing his way toward a future he still believed they could fix. He spent hours at the office, going over designs, making adjustments, preparing for a pitch that could change their trajectory forever. But when he finally stepped outside into the stormy night, something tugged at him. Doubt, fatigue, he couldn't name it. He remembered gripping the steering wheel as rain smeared the windshield, each drop a distorted reflection of his fears. His phone buzzed, and for a second he hoped it was Lila apologizing, but it was Marcus, sending one more urgent update. Aaron didn't open it right away. He should have known something was wrong when headlights suddenly swerved into his lane. There was no time to scream, no time to brace for impact. Only a flash of white, the screech of metal, the sickening jolt that tore his world apart. As the memory faded, Aaron found himself back in the hospital, staring at walls that felt too empty. Back then, he had clung to the belief that his life was still waiting for him, that the woman he loved would be there when he woke, that nothing would happen behind his back while he lay helpless. He never imagined betrayal could reach so far, or that the people he trusted most would rewrite the story of his life before he even opened his eyes. And now, in the sterile quiet of the recovery room, he finally recognized the truth. Nothing about that perfect life had ever been safe. The warning signs were everywhere. He just hadn't wanted to see them, because love can blind a man far more effectively than any accident. And sometimes, the most violent crash isn't the one that destroys your body. It's the one that shatters your faith. The night of the crash lived inside him like a bruise he could never fully press. Without flinching, it came back in fragments, as though his mind were developing photographs in a dark room. Slowly, painfully, revealing truth in ghostly layers of light. He had been exhausted, mind heavy with thoughts he didn't dare speak aloud. The rain had already been falling hard when he stepped into the car, dissolving the streetlights into trembling streaks across the windshield. He remembered gripping the steering wheel tightly, trying to steady not just the vehicle but the panic swelling inside him. Maybe it was the argument with Lila. Maybe it was the pressure of the pitch. Maybe it was the dawning fear that no matter how hard he worked, he was sprinting toward a finish line that kept moving away from him. Whatever it was, his chest felt tight, as though someone were quietly pressing down on his lungs. Thunder rolled above Ravensbrook as he merged onto the main road. The wipers struggled to keep up, and the tires hissed against sheets of water flowing across the asphalt. Aaron blinked hard, trying to focus. The dashboard clock glowed midnight blue. He told himself he should have stayed at the office instead of driving home, but he had needed to return to Leela, to tell her he loved her, to feel even a trace of warmth in the cold space growing between them. He replayed their earlier conversation, the bitterness in her eyes, the exhaustion in his own voice. He wished he had held her, told her he was doing his best, but he knew what she would have said: "Your best isn't enough." Those words had never come from her lips, yet they lived behind every sigh, every look. His phone buzzed again. He risked a glance. Marcus's name illuminated the screen with another text labeled "important," the kind of message that carried urgency in its vagueness. He set the phone down, telling himself he would check it when he stopped at the red light ahead. The rain grew heavier, turning the world into a blur of shapes and distorted reflections. The road was emptier than usual, giving him space to think and space for unease to grow. He felt watched, though the street was deserted. He felt followed, though no headlights trailed behind him. He tried to shake off the sensation. The light turned red, and he came to a stop. Water cascaded down the glass, making the glowing traffic signal look like it was melting. For a moment, he exhaled, rubbing his eyes. He picked up the phone, thumb hovering over Marcus's message. That was when the sound hit him first, an engine revving hard behind him. Too loud, too close, too fast. Aaron's heart seized. He lifted his eyes toward the mirror, just in time to see a pair of blinding headlights bursting through the storm, barreling toward him at a speed no one should have been driving in weather like this. He had half a second, just half, to understand. The car wasn't slowing. He didn't have time to scream, didn't have time to question, didn't have time to brace. The impact came like a monstrous fist, slamming into the back of his vehicle with a ferocity that tore through his body. His head whipped forward, glass shattered, metal groaned around him. Time fractured, the world spun. Lights and shadows colliding as the car skidded out of control. He felt weightless, then violently grounded as the vehicle flipped once, twice, before crashing onto its side. Pain shot through him, sharp, blinding, merciless. His lungs screamed for air. His vision flickered like a dying light bulb. The last thing he remembered before everything went black was a distant voice, faint as wind, through a cracked window. He couldn't see the figure, couldn't recognize the tone, but he felt the presence leaning close, too close. "Stay down," the voice muttered. "It'll be easier this way." He tried to hold on to that memory, but darkness swallowed it whole. What followed existed in a dreamlike haze. He drifted through an ocean of unconsciousness, hearing only pieces of the world above him: sirens, panicked voices, the rhythmic beeping of machines. Sometimes he heard his own name, though he didn't know whose lips spoke it. Sometimes he felt hands on him, steady, clinical, purposeful, doctors moving quickly, nurses shouting orders. There were flashes of stark white light above him, glimpses of ceiling tiles streaking past as he was wheeled down a hospital corridor. He tried to open his mouth, to speak, but his voice dissolved in the void. BP dropping. Prepare for intubation. We're losing him. Hang in there. Sir, just hang in there. He didn't know how long he hovered between life and death. Minutes, hours, days. Time had no meaning. He felt like he was sinking slowly into deep water, listening to the muffled world above the surface. Then came the voices that hurt more than the pain. A woman crying softly, a voice that sounded like Lila's, though distant, strained, trembling. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I can't live like this." He tried to call out to her in the dark. "I'm here. Don't go. Please don't leave me." But no sound escaped him. Another voice joined hers, distorted through the fog in his mind. "He might never wake up," the second voice said. "You have to think realistically. I didn't sign up for this," Leela replied, and voice cracking. Those words sliced through him, even in unconsciousness. He felt her slipping away, saw her turning her back on him in the shadows of his mind. He wanted to wake up, to beg her to stay, but his body remained locked in stillness. The days blurred. He floated, suspended between memories and dreams. Sometimes he thought he could feel sunlight on his skin, Sometimes he felt the cool night air drifting through a cracked window. Nurses spoke around him as though he wasn't there. Doctors charted his condition with clinical detachment. Once, he sensed someone sitting beside his bed, a familiar perfume, a faint tremble in the breath. He hoped it was Lila. "I can't keep doing this," she said. "I'm sorry, but I have a life too." A chair scraped. Footsteps retreated. Silence closed in. Somewhere in the fog, he heard names he didn't recognize. Legal terms, financial decisions, words like conservatorship and authority and signatures. But he couldn't understand, couldn't process, couldn't fight. The darkness kept pulling him back under. One moment, he drifted through a memory of their wedding day, Lila smiling beneath a canopy of white roses. The next moment, he heard a man's voice, calm and transactional. "If we move quickly, everything can be finalized before next month." "Are you sure it's allowed?" Lila asked. "The court won't question it," the man replied. "He won't be aware of anything anyway." Another voice chimed in Marcus's voice. Familiar, smooth, too smooth. "It's the best option. Hard now, but it'll free you from all of this." Aaron tried to scream, tried to claw his way out of the void, but the darkness held him hostage. There were flashes of touch, someone adjusting his blanket, cleaning his wounds, checking his pulse. He sensed concern in some hands, indifference in others, but the hands he longed for never returned. And then, one day or one night, he felt something shift. A ripple in the darkness, a faint tremor in the world around him, a voice, soft and steady, unlike the ones before. "You're not alone," it said. "Come back when you're ready." He didn't know who it was, but it didn't matter, because for the first time since the crash, he felt pulled toward the surface, not pushed down into oblivion. Light pressed against the edges of the darkness. His fingers twitched. Somewhere, machinery beeped faster. He felt breath move through his body. Real breath. And above him, distant but growing clearer, he heard someone gasp. "He's waking up." The world rushed back toward him, and with it, the memories he didn't yet know would destroy everything he believed about the people he trusted most. Silence had its own weight inside a coma. It wasn't empty, or still it pulsed, breathed, whispered. And Aaron floated in the middle of it, unable to move, unable to speak, but somehow still painfully aware of the world shifting around him. It was a strange prison, his body asleep, his mind half awake, catching fragments of reality, like pieces of glass drifting through water. At first, the voices that reached him sounded warm, familiar. He couldn't see her, couldn't open his eyes, but he felt the trembling in Lila's breath as she sat beside him. "Please wake up," she whispered. "I don't know how to do this without you." Her hand, or what he believed was her hand, rested lightly on his wrist. Even in the numbed darkness, he felt that touch as something bright, a small anchor pulling him toward the surface. He tried to squeeze her fingers, tried to tell her he was still here, but his body obeyed nothing. Time passed not in days or hours, but in sensations. The scrape of a chair, the shifting of blankets, the scent of lavender when Lila visited, sharp disinfectant when nurses entered. Sometimes there was music playing softly in the room, a habit Lila had once loved, but even that changed. The first time he sensed it, he wasn't sure. Her visits shortened, the chair stayed silent longer, and when she did speak, her tone carried a brittleness that hadn't been there before. "How long can this go on?" she whispered one afternoon, her voice tight. "They said he might not wake up. How am I supposed to keep doing this?" He wanted to shout that he was waking, that he felt her words as clearly as if he were beside her. But his mind remained locked behind a motionless body. A few days, weeks later, other voices joined hers. He recognized one of them. Noreen, her sister. That sharp voice always carried a twist of condescension. "You can't throw your life away," Noreen said. "The doctors aren't giving you hope. You need to start thinking realistically." "I can't just abandon him," Lila murmured. but there was no conviction behind it. "You're not abandoning him. You're accepting reality," her sister pressed. "And you need to secure your future. His finances, the house, everything is tied to him. What happens if he never wakes up? You'll drown in debt." The word debt cut through him like a blade. Their debt wasn't that large, not enough to swallow her whole. Not unless someone convinced her it would. He heard the rustle of papers, voices drifting closer. Someone, a man, speaking with a confidence that didn't belong in a hospital room. "Under medical power of attorney," the man said, "you would be able to act in his best interests, access accounts, pay bills, make decisions. It's all legal, provided the documentation supports his incapacity." Lila sounded hesitant. "But I don't know if I can." "You don't have to feel guilty," the man continued, his voice calm and coaxing. "This is simply about doing what's necessary. You have options. You deserve to live your life without being bound to uncertainty." Bound to uncertainty. The words tasted poisonous, even inside Aaron's fading consciousness. He recognized the voice now. Damon Briggs, a cousin on Lila's side, a lawyer who always smiled a little too smoothly at family dinners. More papers shuffled, pens clicked. Someone approached his bed. He felt the air shift beside him. "He won't know," Damon said quietly. "And even if he did, the medical reports are clear. There's no guarantee he'll recover." But they were wrong. He felt everything. Not perfectly, not consistently, but enough. Enough to know decisions were being made around him, about him without his consent. He wanted to scream. Instead, he floated in darkness. Days passed in fractured vignettes, a nurse humming softly as she changed his bandages, a doctor discussing his muscle degeneration, the steady beep of his heart monitor. But the conversations that cut deepest were always the ones he wasn't supposed to hear. "Have you thought about what comes next?" Noreen asked one morning. "You can only pause your life for so long." "I don't know," Lila whispered shakily. "It feels cruel. What's cruel is putting your future on hold. You loved him, yes, but you can't sacrifice everything. And Marcus said he can help with the financial part. He knows how the firm works." Aaron's pulse quickened. Marcus. Why was he involved in their personal decisions? As if summoned by the tension in his mind, Marcus's voice appeared days later, smooth, friendly, too comfortable in a room that wasn't his. "You're doing the right thing," Marcus said softly. "He wouldn't want you stuck." "He was always trying so hard," Leela replied, her voice cracking. "But I can't keep living like this." "There's a settlement opportunity from the company responsible for the crash," Marcus said. "Confidential, significant compensation. But the process is easier if you're legally independent." The word independent rang through Aaron like thunder. He understood now, or at least he felt the shape of it. Lila, guided by people who didn't truly care about him, was reorganizing her life without him in it. And from the tone of their discussions, it was clear the decision was being framed as a necessity, not a betrayal. But the darkness around him felt heavy with something more than sorrow. It felt like manipulation, like people were steering Lila, feeding her fears, guiding her toward a decision she was too fragile to resist. One night, when the hospital's lights dimmed and the hallways fell quiet, Aaron heard Lila enter. Alone, her breathing shook as she approached his bed. He felt her hand brush his fingertips, barely there, as if she feared touching a corpse. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't keep waiting. I've tried. I really have. But they're right. I have to think about my future." Her voice broke into a sob. "I wish you had fought harder for us when you were awake. I wish you had made life easier. But you didn't. And now I'm the one paying for it." Aaron wanted to hold her, forgive her, tell her he never meant to disappoint her, but her next words shattered him more completely than the crash ever had. "I'll sign the papers tomorrow." The darkness around him pulsed violently, like a storm forming beneath his consciousness. The beeping of his monitor accelerated. Someone rushed into the room, but the memory blurred, washed away by fear and helplessness. In the following days, voices grew more distant. Lila's visits dwindled until they stopped altogether. Instead, he heard the mechanical hum of machines, the brisk tone of nurses discussing his chart, the cold professionalism of doctors updating his status. But the conversation that haunted him the most came late one night. A door opened softly. Damon's voice drifted inside. "It's done. The court approved it. And he doesn't—" "No," another voice asked Marcus's. "He's unaware. Completely." Marcus exhaled, sounding relieved. "Good. Lila deserves peace. She's moving forward. And as long as she follows the agreement," Damon said, "everything will stay sealed." Footsteps, silence. A door closing, Aaron sank deeper into the void, heart fractured, mind shaken. The betrayal was no longer a possibility, it was complete. Yet even in the suffocating darkness, a spark flickered within him, a tiny ember of will, of anger, of survival. Something inside him whispered that if he didn't rise soon, he would lose everything. Not just Lila, not just his home, but his very identity. And so, deep within the coma, he fought to hold on to himself, fought to rise through layers of unconsciousness, thick as tar. Until one day, a new voice approached, softer, steady, kind. "You're not alone," it said again. "Come back. We're waiting." His heartbeat responded. His eyelids fluttered. Light seeped through the cracks of his darkness. And with one final push, driven by pain, betrayal, and a desperate need for answers, Aaron began to wake. When consciousness returned to him in slow, disjointed waves, it didn't arrive with clarity. It came with pain, sharp, insistent, rooted somewhere deep in his bones. Aaron still couldn't move. He couldn't speak. But the fog around him had thinned just enough for the world to seep through in fractured pieces. He began to hear conversations more clearly, sentences forming rather than floating, and with each passing day, he felt less like a shadow, more like a trapped witness. It started with a man's voice he recognized instantly, a voice that had hovered around his coma, like a low, calculating hum. "Lila, I've reviewed everything," Damon said. "You're fully within your rights to act on his behalf." There was the rustle of papers, stiff and mechanical. Someone must have placed a thick folder on the small hospital table near Aaron's bed. "You now have medical power of attorney," Damon continued, "as well as temporary conservatorship." The court fast-tracked the approval due to the circumstances. Aaron tried to understand. Power of attorney, conservatorship. Legal decisions happening around him, no, over him, while he lay helpless. Lila's voice trembled. "And this means I can make financial decisions. All necessary ones," Damon confirmed. "The mortgage, bank accounts, medical payments, disbursements. You'll handle everything. And frankly, it's for the best." These situations drain families dry. Aaron's heart thudded. Their finances weren't perfect, but they weren't drowning. Why make it sound like she was being crushed under his weight? Why paint him like an anchor pulling her down? "And the divorce," Lila whispered. Aaron felt the world tilt. Even inside the coma, even as his breath caught in the ventilator, he felt the devastating drop in his chest. Damon lowered his voice. "We can file immediately. Given his medical condition, he can't contest. A judge will see reason, will it seem." "Heartless?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "No," Damon replied smoothly. "It will seem necessary." Another voice entered the room, Marcus. Aaron didn't need to see him to recognize the easy confidence in his tone. "You're doing what you have to," Marcus said. "Nobody can blame you for making decisions he can't make." Something inside Aaron tightened, a coil of warning, a jolt of pain sharper than any needle. "Marcus. Here again. Why? Why speak so intimately about decisions that belong to Aaron?" Damon continued flipping through pages. "Initial filings need your signature here and here. I'll submit the petition for divorce along with evidence of medical incapacity. The judge will review it quickly. Medical incapacity, Lila whispered. Uncertain. We have the documentation, Damon said. Dr. Vance wrote that his neurological outcome remains severely compromised, and that long-term recovery is unlikely. That's enough for the court, Aaron's mind reeled. Unlikely. He remembered flashes of consciousness, attempts to move, attempts to wake. How could someone sign such a definitive statement? Marcus stepped closer. Aaron felt the shadow move. Look, it's awful, but dragging this out won't help anyone. You're suffering. He's gone. On paper. This just makes sense. Aaron wanted to scream. He wasn't gone. He was right there, trapped in the shell they'd written off. How could Marcus speak as though his death was a foregone conclusion? How could Lila not push back? But Lila's voice softened into something resigned, defeated. I can't do this alone, she whispered. You won't, Marcus said. I promise. There was a rustle of fabric. Maybe he touched her shoulder. Maybe she leaned toward him. Aaron couldn't see, but he felt something shift in the air. Something intimate. Something wrong. Damon cleared his throat. Now, about the financial matters. There will be bills, substantial ones, but there may also be opportunities. What kind of opportunities? Lila asked. A settlement. Damon explained. The driver who hit Aaron is connected to a corporate entity. Their legal team is willing to discuss compensation, but they'll only negotiate if you control the estate. And if the divorce is processed before things become complicated, Aaron wanted to claw out of his body. A settlement, money. Was that what this was about? Was his silence his life being weighed against dollar signs? Lila hesitated. I don't want it to seem like I'm profiting from this. Damon's tone turned cool. You need to survive. There's nothing unethical about accepting money that will cover your losses, Marcus added softly. It'll help you start fresh. Fresh. The word echoed in Aaron's mind, reverberating like a cruel joke. Fresh. Without him. Fresh. Because he was supposedly never waking up. Several days bled into each other. As papers were signed, decisions finalized, Aaron listened to them discuss accounts he and Lila built together, savings emptied, retirement funds transferred, their shared townhouse listed for sale. Every transaction carried Lila's signature. Every withdrawal pushed him further into a life he no longer owned. He heard arguments, too. Lila's voice cracking, Noreen scolding her for hesitating, Marcus calming her in a tone far too tender for comfort. Damon provided reassurance, legal strategy, cold logic. One particular afternoon burned itself into Aaron's memory. Once the divorce is final, Damon said, you'll have full control over your share. The rest will go into a trust until his condition changes, if at all. And if he wakes up? Lila asked quietly. He won't, Damon answered. And even if he did, these decisions can't be undone without significant legal action, action he won't be capable of. So don't worry. A belief, a declaration, a sentence, spoken as though he were already buried. Aaron felt the faint tremor of a tear sliding from the corner of his closed eye. He didn't understand how they didn't see, didn't notice, didn't question why a supposedly unconscious man was reacting. Their certainty was absolute. Aaron was a ghost, a shadow, a name on paperwork. The worst moment came one night when the room was dark, except for the glow of a corridor light. Lila entered alone, her footsteps unsteady. She approached the bed slowly, as though afraid of getting too close. Aaron, she whispered, her voice breaking. They said it's done. The divorce is final. His heart monitor beeped faster. He couldn't control it. Whether she noticed or chose to ignore it, he didn't know. I'm sorry, she said. I loved you, but I can't stay tied to a life that no longer exists. She placed something on the nightstand, a ring, her wedding ring, the small circle of gold that had once meant forever. I hope you find peace, she whispered. Then she turned and walked out of the room. She never visited again. Aaron floated in a darkness colder than the coma itself. But something inside him refused to die. Some ember of rage, pain, betrayal alive and pulsing. He began to fight harder, to gather strength inside the prison of his own body. Every sound became a lifeline. Every comment became a reason to wake. Every betrayal stitched itself into a rope he used to climb toward the surface. And then, after months of silence from the woman he built his world around, came the day someone entered the room, whose voice carried no agenda, no lies. A nurse, checking his vitals. She gasped softly. His eyes moved. She whispered. He felt a hand brush his cheek, not cold, not hesitant, but gentle, caring. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're safe. Come back to us." That voice was the first kindness he had heard in months, and something inside him responded. His eyelids flickered, his breath hitched, and the darkness fractured like glass struck by sunlight. He was waking, and when he did, nothing would ever be the same. When Aaron finally surfaced from the coma, it wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden gasp, no sharp inhale, no cinematic snapping open of eyes. Instead, consciousness slipped back through him slowly, cautiously. Like a tide approaching shore after a violent storm, the world returned in fragments, light stinging his eyelids, the steady beep of a monitor, the scent of disinfectant, the muted voices drifting past his half-open door. He blinked once, then again. The ceiling swam into focus. A nurse standing beside his bed gasped, "Doctor, he's awake." Footsteps rushed in, quick and urgent. Hands adjusted machines. Someone murmured his name, but Aaron barely absorbed any of it. His body was stiff, heavy, foreign. When he tried to move his fingers, they responded slowly, trembling as though he were controlling someone else's limbs. His throat burned when he attempted to speak. His voice cracked, a rasp that barely resembled sound. "Don't talk yet," the doctor said gently. A woman in her early 40s, eyes calm but bright with relief. Dr. Hana Sato. He would later learn her name, but for now, she was simply the first person to meet his awakening with genuine humanity. "You've been unconscious for quite some time. We're going to take things slowly." "Okay, unconscious for some time." The words pierced him, stirring the shadows that had haunted him. How long had he been trapped? How many conversations had he overheard? Which ones were dream, and which ones real? He tried again. Lila. A silence settled thick and heavy over the room. "Doctor." Sato exchanged a glance with the nurse, a look that made Aaron's stomach twist. "We've contacted your emergency numbers," she said carefully. "We'll see who responds." It wasn't an answer. It was a deflection, and Aaron felt it immediately. Hours passed as tests were run, reflex checks, cognitive exams, whispered observations recorded on clipboards. His body felt damaged in ways he couldn't yet understand. Muscles weak, joints stiff, nerves firing inconsistently. Standing was impossible. Sitting upright required 2 people. But none of that mattered as much as the ache in his chest, the growing certainty that something was terribly, horribly wrong. He drifted in and out of shallow sleep until evening, when the room dimmed and the machines hummed quietly around him. Dr. Sato returned, holding a tablet and wearing an expression he couldn't decipher. "How long?" he asked, voice still raw. She sat beside him. "You were in a coma for 7 months. The air left his lungs. 7 months. Not days, not weeks. 7 whole months of darkness, voices, betrayal." His heart hammered. "My wife, she should be here." Dr. Sato hesitated. "We reached out to her, but she didn't answer." The monitors beside him beeped faster. His breath quickened. "Try again," he croaked. "Please." "We will," she assured. "But there's something else you need to know." He felt pain bloom in his ribs as he forced himself to sit up slightly. What happened while I was out?" "Doctor." Sato took a slow breath. as though preparing him for impact. Your wife filed for divorce during your coma. It was finalized 5 months ago. He didn't understand at first. The words felt like they were being spoken underwater, warped and distant. It took several seconds for the meaning to settle into his bones. Finalized. While he lay unconscious. While he fought for his life. No. His voice trembled violently. She wouldn't. He flashed back to the hospital whispers, the signatures, the meetings. He remembered Marcus's voice urging her forward. Damon's reassurances. Noreen's cold logic. He remembered the moment Lila dropped the ring onto the nightstand and walked out. Reality struck him with brutal, unrelenting clarity. She had done it. She had really done it, Doctor. Sato reached out gently. I know this is overwhelming, but we will help you navigate everything. For now, your focus should be on recovery. Recovery. The word felt meaningless. Recover for what? For whom? His voice broke. She left me. The doctor didn't respond with false comfort. She simply rested a hand on his shoulder, allowing him space to feel the truth. His world shattered quietly, not like the crash with metal and glass and violence, but like ice cracking in the dead of winter. Silent, devastating, irreversible. Later, when the doctor left and the room grew still, Aaron stared at the empty chair beside his bed, the chair where Lila should have been, where she had once sat, sobbing, where she had whispered goodbye. He looked at the nightstand, half expecting to see the ring again, but the staff must have cleared it away long ago. The space was bare, clean, indifferent, just like she had become. A soft knock sounded at the door. A nurse stepped in, a young woman with warm, steady eyes. Hi, she said gently. I'm Naomi. I'll be taking care of you tonight. He nodded weakly. She adjusted his pillows, offered him water, checked his vitals with practiced grace. But unlike others, she didn't avoid his eyes. Didn't treat him like a fragile object. She treated him like a human being. After a moment of silence, she said softly, I'm sorry about what you learned today. He swallowed hard. Everyone knew but me. That's not your fault. He shook his head, feeling the weight of everything pressing down. Naomi, how much did she take? Naomi hesitated. I can't access your private financial details, but based on conversations the staff overheard, it sounded like significant decisions were made. While you were incapacitated, he released a shaky breath. Your house, Naomi added quietly. It was sold a few months ago. His heart cracked again. The townhouse he had poured his soul into, the place he believed they'd raise children, gone. Sold without his knowledge, without his consent. The grief didn't feel like one emotion. It felt like thousands, all clawing at his chest at once. Is there anything left? He whispered. No one should face this alone, Naomi said, her voice firm but warm. Tomorrow, a hospital social worker will help you go through documents. You'll get answers. Answers. He wasn't sure he wanted them, but he needed them. When Naomi left, Aaron lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Memories flickered in and out. Lila's laugh, her touch, the arguments, the disappointment, the final whisper of, I can't live like this. And somewhere beneath the sorrow, something else began to stir, something sharper than grief, something stronger than despair. Not rage, not yet, but the seed of it, a question he couldn't silence. How far did they go while I couldn't fight back? He didn't know the details. But he knew one thing with chilling certainty. People had made decisions over his life while assuming he would never open his eyes again. But he had. And now, he would learn everything they did in the dark. At dawn, he watched sunlight creep cautiously into the room. For the first time since waking, he felt something like purpose. The people who had written him off would soon learn their mistake. He wasn't gone, he wasn't silent, and he wasn't done. The days after waking were harder than anything Aaron had ever endured. The accident broke his body, but the truth what happened while he slept had broken something far deeper. Now, he lived in the ruin of both. He wasn't prepared for how fragile he felt when they first tried to sit him up. His muscles shook uncontrollably, trembling under a weight that shouldn't have been heavy. Breathing alone felt like work, and lifting a cup required the focus of a man trying to rebuild an entire world. Physical therapy began the second week, whether he was ready or not. The therapists were patient but unyielding, their voices encouraging even as they pushed his body to its limits. Standing was the worst. His legs buckled almost immediately the first time, folding beneath him like water-soaked driftwood. He felt humiliated, reduced to a man who could barely support his own weight. "Easy," the therapist said, holding him steady. "Strength comes back, but you have to meet it halfway." Aaron nodded, but shame burned beneath his skin. He used to climb scaffolding with ease, run upstairs 2 at a time, lift heavy beams during on-site inspections. Now, he could barely lift himself out of a chair. Each session left him sweating, trembling, exhausted. But every night, he went to sleep with the knowledge that he had survived something. None of the people who betrayed him believed he could. That truth became a quiet fuel. Some days, though, the emotional pain drowned out everything else, especially when he returned from therapy to an empty hospital room. The kind of emptiness that wasn't physical but personal, carved from absence. He imagined what it would have been like if Lila had been waiting there to cheer him on. If she had kissed his forehead and told him she was proud of him. That alternate reality taunted him like a cruel dream. Instead, he faced only silence. Naomi became the one consistent presence. She checked on him, even when she wasn't assigned to his room. She spoke to him like he mattered, not like he was a medical task or a tragic story. Some nights, when the darkness pressed too tightly around his thoughts, she stayed a little longer, making gentle conversation to keep him from falling into the spiral. But she never pried. She waited for him to speak first. It happened one afternoon during his 3rd week of recovery. He sat in bed, staring at the window at the world that kept going without him. Naomi walked in with a fresh pitcher of water, noticed the tightness in his jaw, and paused. "You're somewhere else today," she said softly, "somewhere heavy." He didn't look away from the window. "I'm trying to figure out how to live a life that isn't mine anymore." She placed the water down and sat at the edge of the chair beside him. "You're still alive, Aaron. That makes it your life." He shook his head. "Everything was taken from me. The house, the money, my marriage. They made decisions while I couldn't defend myself. Who does that to someone they love?" Naomi didn't respond immediately. She let his words settle in the room, giving them space, rather than trying to bury them. "People show who they are when something breaks." She finally said, "Some walk toward the damage, some walk away from it, and some use it." He swallowed hard. "She was my wife. That doesn't mean she was your ally." He turned to look at her then, meeting the steadiness in her eyes. She didn't pity him. She simply acknowledged the truth with a clarity he hadn't been able to reach on his own. "Whatever they did," she continued, "you're awake now. That alone disrupts everything they planned." The idea hit him like a cold splash of water. He'd been so consumed by loss that he hadn't considered this. His waking wasn't just a return to life. It was a direct threat to every secret decision made around him. He nodded slowly. "I need to know what happened. All of it." "You will," Naomi said, "but one step at a time." The next day, he requested copies of his medical documents. It took a few hours, but when the social worker brought them, Aaron felt something almost like adrenaline course through him. He sifted through pages, neurological assessments, physician statements, legal filings. Most of it was clinical, detached, but then he found the report, signed by Dr. Vance. Limited cognitive capacity, unlikely to regain meaningful neurological function. Prognosis, poor to negligible. His jaw tightened. He remembered brief moments of awareness in the coma, hearing voices, feeling touches, reacting emotionally. How could any doctor conclude he had no chance of waking unless the doctor wrote what someone wanted him to write? His pulse quickened. He flipped through more papers. That's when he found the financial summary. Hospital bills, transfers, transactions conducted through his accounts. Most were unfamiliar. Some were large, and several described withdrawals. Approved by spouse under power of attorney. His stomach twisted. He kept digging, reading until the words blurred. The settlement amount was blacked out, sealed, but the wording confirmed Leela had accepted a financial agreement related to the accident. A settlement? Money traded for silence, and for her freedom from him. He stopped reading when a wave of dizziness washed over him. It wasn't the physical weakness this time. It was the emotional weight, heavy, suffocating, bearing down on his ribs until breathing became work again. He didn't hear Naomi enter. She must have noticed the papers scattered across his lap. "Do you want me to get someone?" she asked gently. "No." His voice was low, strained. "I want to stand." She hesitated. "Aaron, your balance." "I want to stand," he repeated, gripping the side rails. Naomi moved beside him, keeping her hands ready but not interfering. He pushed himself upward, legs trembling violently. His grip tightened, his breath shook, but he did it. He stood. It lasted only a few seconds before he sank back down, but those seconds meant something. They meant he wasn't powerless anymore. They meant he could fight. He looked at Naomi, eyes burning not with tears, but with clarity. "I'm not letting them get away with this." Her expression softened, a small but proud smile appearing. "Good. That means you're starting to come back to yourself." But coming back wasn't enough. As the days progressed, Aaron used therapy as a battleground. Every step became a refusal to remain the victim they counted on him to be. Every stretch, every strain, every moment he pushed past, trembling muscles became a declaration of intent. He needed answers. He needed truth. But above all, he needed justice. The more he regained strength, the more he remembered the voices from the coma, Marcus's comments, Damon's legal instructions, Noreen's pressure, Lila's whispered apologies, too little, too late, and one sentence lingered louder than the rest. "It'll be easier this way." Easier for whom? Certainly not for him. Late one evening, Naomi wheeled him to the courtyard for fresh air. He sat under a pale sky, watching leaves tremble in the breeze, feeling something inside him settle into purpose. "I'm going to find out what they did," he said quietly. "Every detail, every lie, every dollar, every choice they made while expecting me to disappear." Naomi looked at him with unwavering steadiness. "Then, you're going to need someone who understands the system." He glanced at her. "Someone like who?" "A lawyer," she replied. "One who won't flinch when things get messy." Aaron let the words sink in. For the first time since waking, the future didn't look empty. It looked dangerous, complicated, full of threads waiting to be pulled, and he was finally strong enough to start pulling. The first clues didn't arrive like revelations. They arrived quietly, small details, inconsistencies, pieces of conversations that clung to the edges of Aaron's thoughts and refused to loosen their grip. Recovery sharpened him. Every day his mind grew clearer, his body steadier, and with clarity came suspicion dark, thick, impossible to ignore. The hospital's financial officer delivered the next blow without realizing it. He came into the room, holding a folder. "Mr. Cole, I'm here to review the outstanding balances and update your insurance file now that you're awake." There were changes over the past months. Aaron listened carefully. The man flipped through pages, frowning. "It seems your wife authorized several large payments. The main hospital bills were covered by a lump sum, not your insurance. There are references to an external source of funds." Aaron felt his heartbeat shift. "What source?" The man hesitated. "That information is redacted." The transaction came through a private settlement channel. There, the word again, settlement. He could feel the pieces clicking into place. But the picture was still incomplete. He thanked the man, even though gratitude felt like sandpaper inside his throat. When he was alone, his gaze drifted to the small bedside table where his scattered documents lay. Medical reports, power of attorney forms, copies of legal filings Naomi had helped him request. None of them contained the full truth, but every page smelled faintly of betrayal. He picked up a copy of the divorce decree and forced himself to read it again. Sections blurred together, but a few lines stood out. Incapacitated, unable to participate in legal proceedings. Prognosis, negligible recovery potential. All lies. Lies written by people who never imagined he would wake up to see them. He moved to the next set of documents, the financial statements. They were incomplete, scrubbed clean in places, with entire sections blacked out, as if someone had painted rectangles of secrecy across his life. But even the remnants told a damning story. Large transfers from the joint account to an unfamiliar bank. Withdrawals labeled with vague terms like house maintenance or debt clearance, payments to Damon Briggs's law office, and one entry that made Aaron's breath hitch. Confidential disbursement, third-party post-accident settlement. He stared at the line until the letters blurred. That was it. That was the money they gave Lila to walk away quietly, to stay silent, to erase him. He closed his eyes and felt a sickening wave of nausea roll through him. How many people had been involved? How many had chosen convenience over conscience? A soft knock broke his spiral. Naomi entered, carrying a tray of food. She paused when she saw the papers scattered across his lap and the tension in his shoulders. "You found more," she murmured. "Yes," he whispered. "But the more I learn, the less I understand. They took everything, and they did it like it was nothing." Naomi set the tray aside and pulled a chair to his bedside. "What else did you discover?" He showed her the financial pages. She scanned them carefully, eyes narrowing. "This isn't normal," she said. "The blacked-out sections alone are suspicious. No beneficiary statement should look like this." "They thought I wouldn't wake up," Aaron said. "They thought they'd never get caught." Naomi grew quiet, thoughtful. After a moment, she said, "You need someone who knows what they're looking at. Someone who can tell you exactly what they tried to hide." "A lawyer?" Aaron asked. She nodded. "A good one. And not the kind who works with their side." He leaned back, breath unsteady. Who would do something like this? How many people were part of this? "I don't know," Naomi said gently. "But I think you've only uncovered the surface." That truth unsettled him more than anything else. Later that afternoon, while he recovered from therapy, the hospital social worker, Helen, arrived with a packet of documents he'd requested: bank records, property transfer filings, legal notices from the courthouse. She placed them in a stack on the bed. "You'll want to review these carefully," she said. "And please get help. This isn't something you should navigate alone." He thanked her, though his focus was already locked on the paperwork. The townhouse sale documents were inside. He skimmed through them, jaw tightening. The house had been sold 4 months earlier. Lila's signature appeared on every line, accompanied by Damon's. The sale price was much lower than market value. Why? He flipped to the final page and froze. The buyer's name. Not a company, not a stranger. Marcus Hale. His stomach dropped. He stared at the name, disbelieving. Marcus had bought the house, the home Aaron and Lila shared, the home he nearly died trying to protect their future for. Had they been planning this even before the accident? He felt the room sway. His breath grew shallow. Naomi noticed immediately, stepping closer. "What happened?" He pointed at the page, unable to speak. She took the document, and her eyes widened slowly. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This isn't just exploitation. This is coordinated. Coordinated." The word echoed in his skull like a warning bell. Naomi lowered the papers. "Aaron, you're uncovering something serious." They didn't make desperate decisions. They made strategic ones. Strategic, planned, deliberate. He pressed a hand to his forehead. What if? What if the accident wasn't random? What if? Naomi didn't answer. She didn't have to. The possibility hung heavy between them. That night, Aaron couldn't sleep. The machines beeped softly beside him, but his mind raced faster than the monitors could track. Marcus's involvement, Damon's swift paperwork, Lila's sudden shift, the settlement money, the house sale, the lies in his medical report. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't panic. It wasn't grief. It was a plan executed by people who saw him as a problem, an obstacle, a burden. And if they had worked so hard to secure their freedom from him, what were they hiding? He replayed the voice he'd heard on the night of the crash, the one that whispered in the darkness, "Stay down. It'll be easier this way." He had always doubted that memory, dismissed it as a hallucination. But now, what if it wasn't? The next morning, he asked Naomi for help accessing the electronic visitor log. She hesitated, but eventually brought him what she could, a simplified record of visits. Lila's name appeared often in the beginning, then less and less. That wasn't surprising, but Marcus's visits, at least 8 times in the first month, then more frequently during legal meetings, then sporadic visits later, at odd hours. Damon visited multiple times too. Why would his colleague visit him while he was unconscious? Why would he meet with hospital staff? Why would Damon discuss guardianship documents in person? Nothing made sense unless everything made sense. Unless they were all part of the same machine. Aaron's pulse throbbed. His hands trembled as he pieced the clues together. He didn't have proof yet, but he had a timeline, motives, opportunities. He needed someone who could turn these suspicions into answers. Naomi entered to check on him. She found him surrounded by documents, eyes sharp with purpose. "I need a lawyer," he said. "Someone who isn't afraid to dig. I have someone in mind," Naomi replied softly. "I can make the call tonight." He exhaled slowly, for the first time feeling a path forming beneath his feet. He looked down at the papers, at the signatures, the transactions, the omissions. "They tried to erase me," he whispered, "but I'm still here." Naomi nodded, her expression fierce. "Then let's make sure they realize waking up was the biggest mistake they ever made." Aaron closed his eyes. He didn't know what he would discover next, but he knew one thing with chilling clarity. He was done being silent. And the truth, whatever shape it took, would be far louder than anything they ever expected. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments, like shards of broken glass. Aaron had to pick up one by one, carefully, painfully, cutting himself on every new discovery. By the time Theo Ramirez walked into his hospital room, Aaron had already collected enough pieces to know his past life had been dismantled with precision. But he wasn't prepared for the shard Theo carried with him. Theo had been his closest friend at the firm, loyal, honest, someone who never played games. When he entered the room, Aaron could see the shock in his eyes, the disbelief that his friend was actually awake. "Jesus, Aaron," Theo whispered, gripping the edge of the bed. "I mean, they said I didn't think you'd ever—" Aaron forced a thin smile. "Yeah, I'm here." Theo pulled a chair close and sat heavily. "Man, you look different." "I feel different," Aaron admitted. "Life happens when you're unconscious for 7 months." Theo hesitated, then asked carefully, "How much do you know?" Aaron studied him. Enough to know Lila left, enough to know she didn't leave empty-handed. Theo's expression tightened. He exhaled slowly and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "There's more. A lot more. And I don't know how to say it without just ripping the bandage off." "Rip it," Aaron said quietly. "I'm already bleeding." Theo swallowed. Aaron. She wasn't alone during those months. Not for long. The room grew painfully still. Aaron's chest tightened. "Who?" Theo looked away. shame flickering in his eyes, even though he wasn't the one guilty of anything. Marcus, he whispered. The two of them, people saw them together. A lot. Even expecting betrayal doesn't soften the blow. Aaron felt something inside him collapse, as though another unseen crash had thrown him violently off balance. Marcus, his colleague, his friend, the man who told him to work late the night of the accident, the man whose name kept appearing in every shadow of the truth. How? Aaron forced out. How long? Theo winced. Some say it started after the accident. Some say it began before. I don't know, but they sure didn't waste time. He helped her move into that fancy condo, a penthouse in Northcrest Tower. Aaron closed his eyes. He remembered Lila complaining about their modest townhouse, the way she looked longingly at luxury apartments during Sunday drives. And Marcus, the charming, confident, smooth-talking Marcus, had been the perfect mirror for everything she claimed Aaron couldn't give her. I should have seen it, Aaron murmured. I should have known. No, Theo said firmly. She hid it well. So did he. You trusted them. That's not a flaw. That's who you are. Aaron wasn't sure whether to be grateful or devastated. Theo continued. After the accident, Marcus became her support system. At least that's what she told people. But it didn't look like support. What did it look like? Aaron asked. Though he dreaded the answer, Theo hesitated, then said, like a relationship. A coldness seeped into Aaron's bones. He had suspected something when he heard Marcus's voice while trapped in the coma, but hearing it confirmed was different. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was truth, a painful, jagged truth that cut deeper than anything Damon's legal games or Lila's signatures ever could. He remembered moments, tiny ones, subtle ones that suddenly made perfect sense. The times Marcus complimented Lila too warmly, the way she laughed at his jokes, even when she ignored Aaron's attempts to make her smile. The brief touches, the glances that lingered a little too long. He'd convinced himself it was harmless, that he was overthinking, that she would never betray him like that. But she had, and Marcus had helped her. Aaron looked at Theo. Did the firm know? Theo grimaced. Rumors spread fast, and after a while, people stopped calling it a rumor. Humiliation washed over Aaron, the kind that made his chest burn and his throat tighten. The idea of co-workers whispering about his wife and his colleague while he lay dying in a hospital bed made him feel small, worthless, insignificant. Why didn't anyone tell me earlier? He choked out. Theo's eyes softened. Because nobody thought you'd wake up. The words landed with devastating clarity. Nobody thought he'd wake. Nobody thought he'd fight. Nobody thought he'd learn the truth. Theo took a slow breath before continuing. There's something else you need to know about the company, about the accident. Aaron tensed. The driver who hit you, Nathan Crowley, was a senior executive at Helix Logistics. Big shot corporate guy with connections everywhere. He'd been in trouble before for reckless driving, but all his cases disappeared. Disappeared, Aaron repeated. Theo nodded. Settled, sealed, erased. The man was untouchable. Aaron replayed the night of the crash. The headlights, the engine revving, the violent impact, the voice whispering, "Stay down." A chill ran through him. Did Marcus know about Crowley? He asked. Theo hesitated. I think so. A few weeks after your accident, Marcus was called into several meetings with Helix representatives. They were closed-door conversations. He came out looking nervous or guilty, or both. Aaron gripped the blanket, knuckles white. Why would he be involved? Because your pitch, the one you were working on the night of the crash, was tied to a project Helix wanted. Marcus took over your role after you. After the accident, a lot of your work became his. And he moved up fast. The realization struck like a punch. Marcus gained everything when Aaron fell. A higher position, more influence at the firm, and Lila. Aaron whispered. Theo swallowed. They were seen leaving meetings together, having dinner. traveling. She introduced him as someone who helped her through tragedy. The word tragedy made Aaron's ribs ache. Luke calling his death a tragedy would have been believable, but calling his existence one felt cruel. Emotions churned inside him: rage, sorrow, disbelief. Each one rose like a wave, only to crash back down, leaving him gasping for clarity. "So they destroyed my life and then built theirs on the ashes," he said bitterly. Theo nodded. "I'm sorry, Aaron. You didn't deserve any of this." Aaron closed his eyes, letting the pain wash through him. When he opened them again, something sharper gleamed beneath the grief. "What about the settlement?" he asked. "Did anyone hear anything about the terms?" Theo shook his head. "Almost no one knows the details. It was sealed under a confidentiality clause. But people talked. There were whispers that Leela got a massive payout, enough to buy that condo outright. Of course she had. Money in exchange for silence. Money in exchange for abandoning him. Money in exchange for letting them rewrite the story of who he was. Now he understood why so many things had been covered up, why so many signatures appeared where they shouldn't have, why so many people seemed determined to declare him unable to recover. He wasn't just inconvenient, he was dangerous to their plans, and waking up meant he was a threat. Theo took his hand gently. "Whatever you decide to do, I'm with you. You're not alone in this." Aaron nodded, though his mind was already racing a storm of questions and grim possibilities. The betrayal he had uncovered wasn't just personal. It was structural, intentional, and possibly criminal. He needed answers. He needed evidence. He needed someone capable of tearing through the lies and revealing the truth. When Theo left, Aaron sat in silence for a long time, staring at the city through the window. Lights shimmered in the distance, cold and unreachable. But he didn't feel powerless anymore. He felt awake, more awake than he had ever been. The people who took everything from him had acted under one assumption: that he would never open his eyes again. And now, with every breath he drew, that assumption unraveled. He whispered into the stillness, voice low but fierce, "They're going to regret betting against me." The hospital courtyard was quiet at dusk, washed in a soft orange glow that made the world look deceptively peaceful. Aaron sat in his wheelchair beneath a trembling maple tree, wrapped in a thin blanket, staring at the horizon as if he could force answers out of it. Naomi stood beside him, her arms crossed against the cold, watching him with a mix of concern and resolve. "You're sure you want to do this?" she asked. "Yes," he whispered. "I need someone who can tell me what they did and how to undo it." Naomi nodded. "Then I'll call her." Her. The lawyer Naomi had mentioned someone who wasn't afraid of messy cases or powerful opponents. Someone who didn't flinch when corruption was involved. That alone made Aaron's pulse tighten with anticipation. When Naomi walked a few feet away to make the call, Aaron closed his eyes. The truth he'd learned from Theo echoed through his mind. Marcus, the settlement, the house, the lies. He replayed the memory of a voice in the darkness telling him to stay down. He thought of Lila signing away their life with such ease. The rage inside him wasn't loud. It was quiet, controlled, sharpened by grief. He didn't want revenge. Not exactly. He wanted something deeper. He wanted the truth to stand on its own feet, undeniable and unfiltered. And he wanted the people who had hollowed out his life to face what they had done. Naomi returned, phone still in her hand. "She's coming tomorrow morning." A tension he didn't realize he'd been holding finally loosened. "What's her name?" "Elena Ward." There was something in the way Naomi said it, like the name carried weight, like it belonged to someone who didn't lose. The next morning, Aaron waited in his room with documents spread across his lap. He had barely slept, mind pacing through every memory, every signature, every lie he'd uncovered. When the door finally opened, a woman stepped in with a confidence that filled the room before she even spoke. Elena Ward was in her late 30s, tall, with dark curls pulled into a tight bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore a charcoal blazer, and carried a leather portfolio under one arm. Her presence was both calm and formidable, like a storm that had learned patience. She approached the bed and extended her hand. "Mr. Cole, I'm Elena. Naomi told me everything she could without breaking any rules." Her handshake was firm, grounding. "Thank you for coming," Aaron said, trying to steady his voice. "I'd say it's good to meet you under better circumstances," she replied. "But frankly, these circumstances are exactly why I do what I do." She sat across from him and opened her portfolio. "I heard you have concerns about the guardianship process, the medical filings, financial activity, and the divorce. I also understand there was a private settlement related to your accident." Aaron nodded slowly. "I don't have proof of everything, just pieces." "Oh, that's enough to start," Elena said. "Nothing stays buried when you ask the right questions." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me everything, from the night of the accident to the moment you woke up." So he did. Not all at once, not perfectly. His memory was fractured, his emotions raw, but he told her everything he could remember. The crash, the voice telling him to stay down, the whispers in the hospital room, the legal conversations he heard while trapped in his coma, the transfer of the house, the settlement, Marcus visiting at strange hours, Lila's final whisper that she had signed the papers. Elena listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable but intensely focused. When he finished, she took a deep breath. "Mr. Cole," she said, "what happened to you isn't just immoral. It's potentially illegal on several levels." He swallowed. "But can we prove it?" "That's why I'm here," she replied. "Let's go through what you have." She sifted through the papers he'd collected. Her eyes narrowed at the redacted sections, the improbable sale price of the townhouse, the medical statements that contradicted his recovery timeline. "This report alone," she said, tapping Dr. Vance's prognosis, "could be grounds for malpractice if it was negligent or intentionally misleading. And if someone influenced him to write it, that's a whole different story." Aaron felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Elena moved on to the financial documents. "These transfers are suspicious. The amounts, the timing, the lack of transparency, and the settlement being sealed." She paused, lips pursed. "Private settlements aren't unusual, but the fact that your spouse controlled everything while you were incapacitated, and the fact that she divorced you during the process, is a red flag." She continued flipping pages. "And the house sale? That may be fraudulent if you didn't consent, and she wasn't authorized to transfer marital property in that way, especially at such a low price." At Marcus's name, her expression hardened. "And the buyer, being someone with direct access to your wife and your professional life, that's a conflict of interest so blatant it's almost arrogant." Aaron watched her closely. "What does all of that mean for me?" Elena folded her hands. "It means you might have a case big enough to challenge the divorce, the settlement, the sale of the home, and the medical filings. It means you might be able to expose the corporation behind Crowley. And it means the people involved may face consequences." Her voice grew sharper. "But I won't lie to you. This won't be easy. They'll fight back hard. They'll try to bury you again figuratively this time. But you waking up, that changes everything." Aaron felt his breath catch. "Do you believe me?" "Absolutely," Elena said without hesitation. "Not because your story is tragic, though it is, but because the paperwork doesn't lie. When people manipulate the system, they always leave fingerprints. We just have to find them." He nodded slowly. "What do we do next?" "I'll subpoena your full medical records," she said. "The unredacted versions. I'll request the settlement documents from Helix Logistics. They'll fight it, but there are ways. I'll also begin the process of reviewing the legality of the guardianship and divorce proceedings." Suspicion flickered in her eyes. "And I want to look deeper into Marcus Hale. Very few people rise quickly at a corporation without someone clearing a path for them." Aaron's mind drifted back to the voice from the crash. He had pushed the memory aside, convinced it was a hallucination, But the more he uncovered, the more it felt real. "Do you think," he asked slowly, "that the accident wasn't just an accident?" Elena studied him for a moment. "I don't have enough information yet, but the timing is suspect. The driver's history is suspect. The settlement is suspect. And when too many things are suspect, it stops looking like coincidence." Aaron's chest tightened. "I'm not saying someone orchestrated the crash," she added, "but I'm not ruling out that someone might have benefited from it. Marcus, Helix, the project he was working on, the promotion Marcus received, the possibilities made his stomach churn." Elena closed her portfolio and stood. "I'll begin immediately. In the meantime, keep documenting everything you remember. Even small details can break cases open." Aaron nodded. "Thank you. You don't need to thank me," she replied. "You survived something you weren't meant to. Let's make sure that means something." When she left, Aaron sat in silence, absorbing every word. He wasn't just reclaiming his life. He was exposing the rot beneath it. The world outside his window looked different now. Bigger, sharper, full of shadows he finally had the strength to walk toward. Naomi stepped in a moment later. "How did it go?" Aaron looked at her, a new steadiness in his eyes. "It went well. She believes me." "And do you believe yourself now?" Naomi asked softly. For the first time since waking, he answered without hesitation. "Yes," he whispered, "and that scares them more than anything." The next week unfolded like the tightening of a noose, not around Aaron's neck, but around the lies that had been woven in his absence. Elena moved with a swiftness that stunned him. She didn't waste time, didn't soften blows, didn't sugarcoat the process. Every day, she returned with documents, updates, and new pieces of a story he hadn't even known he was living. But the darkest discoveries came from the accident itself. One afternoon, Elena entered his room with a thin folder. Her expression was hard, focused, like she had been sharpening herself on bad news all morning. "I have information," she said, closing the door behind her. Aaron's stomach tightened. He gestured for her to sit, though his hands trembled slightly from the physical therapy session he had finished moments earlier. Elena placed the folder on his lap. "I accessed the public portion of the accident report. Then I compared it to what I pulled through unofficial channels." He didn't ask how she did that. The answer didn't matter. What mattered were the pieces she was about to reveal. "The reports don't match," she said simply. His breath hitched. "What do you mean, don't match?" "The original police report," she said, tapping the first paper, "states that Nathan Crowley was driving under poor weather conditions, lost control, and collided with your vehicle. It classifies the incident as a non-criminal accident with no signs of intoxication." Aaron forced himself to read the neatly typed lines. It all looked official, sterile, polished, too polished. But the supplemental report, written by the first responders, is very different. Elena slid another sheet toward him. "This one says that Crowley was slurring his words, smelled of alcohol, and became aggressive when questioned. It notes that officers were preparing to conduct a sobriety test before a supervisor intervened." Aaron's pulse hammered. "A supervisor?" "Yes," Elena said. "A supervisor who later claimed the supplemental report was inaccurate and requested it be edited before submission." "Edited," Aaron repeated, voice hollow. "They replaced the entire narrative," Elena said. "Crowley went from drunk and uncooperative to a victim of weather conditions. And that's not all." She pulled out a third sheet photographs, blurry, grainy, but unmistakably from the traffic camera near the intersection where the crash occurred. "This camera angle wasn't included in the final report," she explained, "but an internal source sent me these. They're time-stamped minutes before your collision." "Notice anything?" Aaron squinted. The image was dark, rain streaking across the lens, but he could make out a black SUV swerving across lanes. It looked out of control, but not because of weather. "He was driving aggressively," Aaron whispered. "Recklessly." "Yes," Elena said. "And there's more." She enlarged the image. Light from the street lamp caught a glint, something metallic in Crowley's hand. A bottle, she said. Most likely alcohol. Aaron stared until his vision blurred. How did they hide all this? Helix Logistics, Elena replied. Their legal department has a long history of cleaning up Crowley's messes. They're skilled at misdirection, sealed settlements, and making evidence disappear. He swallowed hard. And Leela, she agreed to the settlement without knowing all this. Elena's jaw tightened. I think she knew some of it. Enough to scare her. Enough to make her compliant. But whether she knew the full truth, I doubt it. Damon and Marcus handled most interactions with the corporation. Aaron's breath turned shallow. So, he whispered, was this just an accident or something more? Elena leaned back, eyes sharp. I don't have proof it was intentional, but I can tell you the cover-up was absolutely intentional, and the people around you benefited from your disappearance. The room felt colder, the shadows thicker. Aaron remembered the voice he'd heard while drifting into unconsciousness. Stay down, it'll be easier this way. He had told himself it was a dream, a hallucination, but now he wasn't sure anymore. Elena continued, let's talk about the settlement. I found a reference in the hospital billing records, meaning part of it was likely routed through your medical account. But the full agreement, it's sealed. Only 3 people signed it. Leela, a Helix representative, and Marcus. Aaron's head snapped up. Marcus. Yes, she said. He signed as your legal proxy. No. Aaron's voice shook. He had no right. Lila had power of attorney. Not him. Technically, Elena said. He shouldn't have been allowed to sign anything, but the document states that he was acting in collaboration with the primary guardian, meaning your wife, or rather, your ex-wife. That little phrase creates enough ambiguity to avoid immediate legal scrutiny. Aaron felt sick. Marcus hadn't just been comforting Lila or playing the supportive colleague. He had placed himself in the center of the settlement process, handling money that wasn't his, decisions that weren't his, consequences that should have never belonged to him. How much did he get? Aaron asked. Though he dreaded the answer, I don't know yet. Elena admitted, but given how fast he rose in the firm after your accident, I'd say he got something. Aaron's hands clenched the sheets. Betrayal no longer felt like a clean cut. It felt like a jagged wound that kept tearing deeper. Elena continued, flipping pages. I also reviewed the guardianship hearing. It was rushed unusually fast. Damon filed medical statements that conflicted with your actual chart. He claimed you were in a persistent vegetative state and had no neurological response. Those were lies. Aaron stared at her. How can he do that? How can a lawyer get away with it? He can't, Elena said calmly. Not once we expose it. Her confidence steadied him. Here's the path forward, she said. We challenge the guardianship, expose the fraudulent medical filings, reopen the case on your divorce, and request access to the sealed settlement. If they resist, we escalate. Public pressure works wonders when corporations and unethical attorneys are involved. Aaron took a slow breath. He could feel something inside him, shifting something heavy, something rooted, something ancient. A need not just for truth, but for justice. He wasn't just reclaiming his life. He was taking back the narrative they tried to erase. Elena paused. There's one more thing I want to show you. She slid a final photograph across the bed. It was another traffic image, but this one showed a figure standing outside Crowley's SUV only minutes after the crash. The figure wore a hood, shoulders broad, stance cautious. Elena pointed to the timestamp. This was taken after the crash, but before paramedics arrived. This person wasn't in the official report. Do we know who it is? Aaron asked. Not yet, she said, but the pattern suggests someone stopped at the scene, someone who didn't want to be identified. The hospital room felt colder. Aaron stared at the photo until the edges blurred, a prickling sensation crawling up his spine. That night, the voice he'd heard whispered again, in his memory. Stay down. And suddenly, the betrayal he'd uncovered no longer felt contained to corporate files and court documents. It felt alive. Someone had been there. Someone had watched him bleed in the dark. Someone had spoken to him before slipping away. And whoever that someone was, their shadow still hung over his life. Elena collected her papers and rose. "We're close, Aaron. Closer than they ever expected. Keep your strength. Tomorrow we begin breaking this case open." When she left, Aaron remained silent for a long time, staring at the photo under the dim hospital light. He was no longer afraid of the truth. He was afraid of how deep it went. The day he was discharged from the hospital felt surreal. Not triumphant, not hopeful, just strange. Like stepping into a world that continued without him, and barely noticed he'd come back. He stood outside the front entrance, with a cane in one hand and a small duffel bag in the other. The wind hit him harder than expected, and for a moment he had to steady himself, grounding his feet on the cold pavement. Naomi helped him into the rideshare that would take him to his temporary housing, a small, subsidized apartment arranged through a hospital recovery program. The place was quiet, plain, furnished with only the essentials, but it was his not forged from someone else's decisions or signed away behind his back. He breathed in deeply, the air thick with dust and new beginnings. He spent 3 days adjusting to his new reality, learning to move around the small space, organizing his papers, writing down every memory that resurfaced, every name, every suspicious detail, every voice he heard in the coma. Each entry felt like a wound, but also like a weapon, something he could use to reclaim the story stolen from him. But nothing prepared him for what Elena proposed at the end of that week. "It's time," she said over the phone. "You're strong enough, and we need answers directly from her." Her, Leela. The name still carried weight, still carved into him like a scar he'd learned to walk around but hadn't healed from. Elena continued, "We've built enough of the foundation, the financial transfers, the guardianship irregularities, the settlement inconsistencies. The timeline alone is damning, but we need a direct admission. Something that comes from her mouth." Aaron exhaled slowly. "You want me to confront her? I won't force that on you," Elena replied, "but it will move the case forward, and closure matters, even if it hurts." He hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready." "You're more ready than you think," she said gently. "And you won't go alone." Which was why, the next morning, he found himself standing in front of Ravensbrook's glittering Northcrest Tower, the kind of luxury building Lila used to stare at longingly from their parked car, insisting one day they'd live somewhere better. She had gotten her wish, just without him. Elena stood steady at his side, her expression icy with focus. "If at any point you want to walk away," she said, "we walk away. Understood?" Aaron nodded. His cane felt heavier than usual, as though the weight of everything he'd lost had lodged itself in the metal. They walked into the lobby, which smelled like lemon polish and expensive silence. The doorman called Leela's unit and announced them. There was a long pause, long enough that Aaron wondered if she would refuse to see him. Then the elevator unlocked with a soft chime. "She's expecting you," the doorman said. Expecting. As if any part of this was something Aaron should have had to do. The ride up was suffocatingly slow. Elena didn't speak. She simply stood beside him, like a pillar of resolve, her presence grounding him through the rising anxiety, clawing at his ribs. When the elevator doors opened, the penthouse hallway stretched out like a magazine cover, marble floors, soft lighting, artwork curated to impress. Leela's door sat at the far end, tall and intimidating. Aaron knocked once. The door cracked open slowly. Lila appeared, and for the first time since he'd last seen her on that night, she whispered goodbye to a man she believed would never wake. He looked at the woman who had once been the center of his world. She looked different, stunning, in a curated way. Designer clothes, subtle makeup, hair styled with a precision he'd never seen when they were together. She looked like someone who had rebuilt her life from the ground up, Only the ground used to be his. Her eyes widened, shock flared, then something softer, guilt, before it shifted into something she seemed more comfortable with. Defensiveness. Aaron, she breathed. You're walking. He gripped his cane a little tighter. Surprised. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. I just didn't think that I'd wake up, he finished. She opened her mouth, but didn't answer. Elena stepped forward. We'd like to talk. May we come in? Lila hesitated. For a moment, Aaron thought she'd slam the door. Instead, she stepped aside. The penthouse was beautiful in a cold, impersonal way. Oversized furniture, marble counters, art with no meaning. It was nothing like the warm, cluttered townhouse they'd shared. Lila gestured weakly to the living room. Aaron didn't sit. If he sat, he wasn't sure he'd stand again. Elena stayed slightly behind him, allowing the confrontation to unfold, but remaining ready to intervene. Lila crossed her arms. So, why are you here? Aaron's chest tightened. She didn't ask how he was. Didn't say she was glad he was alive. Just, why are you here? He steadied himself. I need to understand what happened. Something flickered across her face. Fear, shame, irritation. What do you mean? She asked. Everything is in the papers. The divorce is final. This isn't about the divorce, Aaron said, voice low. It's about what you did while I was unconscious. Her posture stiffened. I did what I had to do, Aaron. I didn't have a choice. No choice, he repeated. You drained our accounts. You sold our home. You took a settlement from the company whose executive put me in a coma. Her eyes darted to the side. I was drowning in bills. Nobody would help, Damon said. Damon said, Aaron echoed bitterly. And you believed him over me. You weren't there, she snapped. I was alone, Helix pressured us. The lawyers kept saying you wouldn't wake up. They said the settlement would protect me from future medical debt. He stared at her. So you took the money? Yes, she whispered. I took it. We needed it. And I needed stability. He felt something fracture in his chest. Hearing her admit it, hearing her justify it, it hurt more than he expected. And Marcus, he asked quietly, did he give you stability too? Lila froze. Her eyes widened with a guilt she couldn't mask. It wasn't, she started. Stop lying, he said. Just say it. She swallowed hard. Marcus was there for me. When everything fell apart, when you were dying. I wasn't dying, Aaron said. I was unconscious. I was fighting. And you gave up on me. She flinched. I didn't know what else to do. You could have waited. I waited for months, she cried. You don't understand, Aaron. Watching you like that cold, still, hooked up to machines broke me. Everyone kept telling me to move on, that I was wasting my life clinging to someone who would never come back. And Marcus, he helped me survive. Aaron's throat tightened. You didn't just move on, Lila. You replaced me. Silence swelled thick between them. Elena stepped forward slightly. Did you know the settlement was tied to sealing all information about the crash? Lila nodded slowly. Yes, Helix said. It was standard. They didn't want negative publicity. And you agreed. Aaron said, without knowing the full truth. I didn't want to know the truth, she whispered. I just wanted out. There it was, finally spoken aloud. Out. Of her marriage, of responsibility, of him. He felt the words like a blade sliding between ribs. Aaron exhaled shakily. I deserved better than being erased. Lila's gaze faltered. Maybe you did. Not maybe, he said. I did. She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. Elena stepped closer, her voice cool and precise. Mrs. Cole, your statements today confirm that decisions were made under misleading circumstances. We will be filing motions to challenge the settlement, the divorce process, and the guardianship filings. Lila looked up sharply. You can't do that. Everything is legal. It's done. Nothing is done, Elena said. Not anymore. Fear flickered across Leela's face. Fear not of Aaron, but of consequences. Aaron steadied himself on his cane. I didn't come here to hurt you, Lila. I came here to hear the truth. And now that I have it, we're done. Lila's breath hitched. Aaron, goodbye, he said softly. He turned toward the door, each step a quiet reclamation of strength. As the elevator descended, Elena placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. You did well, she said. He nodded. It didn't feel good. It wasn't supposed to feel good. She replied. It was supposed to free you. For the first time since waking, he felt something like release, painful, raw but real. He wasn't living in the past anymore. He was walking away from it, into whatever truth waited next. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, the kind of place where secrets either died quietly or blew apart in the open. Aaron sat beside Elena at the plaintiff's table, cane resting against his leg, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles ached. He tried to steady his breathing, but the reality of where he was, what this day meant, pressed heavily against his ribs. This was the moment everything began to unravel. Not him. Not anymore. Them. Across the aisle sat Lila, dressed in a beige blazer that cost more than the salary he once earned in a month. She kept her eyes lowered, shoulders tense, fingers twined nervously in her lap. Damon, her lawyer cousin, sat rigid beside her, flipping through documents with the stiff arrogance of someone who believed he had control over a situation that was rapidly crumbling. And next to them, wearing a tailored suit and the smug expression of a man who thought the world owed him comfort, Marcus Hale. His presence wasn't required, but he came anyway, as though he wanted to watch the fallout he'd never anticipated. Helix Logistics representatives filled the row behind them, their attorneys whispering in hushed tones, their eyes sharp and predatory. They didn't fear Aaron. They feared exposure. Elena leaned toward him. Remember, you don't have to speak unless you choose to. I'll handle the foundation. Just breathe. He nodded. Breathing felt impossible. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The courtroom quieted, the air taut with anticipation. The proceedings began not with allegations, but with Elena's calm introduction. Your Honor, today we present a challenge to a guardianship and divorce that were executed under fraudulent representations. We also request the court open the sealed settlement tied to Mr. Cole's accident due to evidence suggesting misconduct and possible coercion. The judge, an older man with grave eyes, looked at him briefly. Mr. Cole, I'm aware of your medical history. I'm glad to see you recovered enough to be present. The sincerity in his voice nearly cracked something inside Aaron, but he held steady. Damon stood, trying to interject before Elena could continue. Your Honor, my clients acted entirely within the law. Medical statements at the time confirmed Mr. Cole's incapacitation. The divorce proceedings were lawful. Any attempt to undo them is. Elena rose sharply. Your Honor, if I may present evidence to the contrary. The judge motioned for her to proceed. She began with the medical reports. Side by side, she displayed the doctor's prognosis used for the guardianship hearing and Aaron's actual medical chart from the same week. These documents contradict each other, Elena said. The filed statements claim Mr. Cole had no neurological response, yet the medical chart signed by 3 different nurses states that he reacted to stimuli, squeezed a hand on command, and had measurable cognitive reflexes. These were omitted from the court-submitted documents. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Damon stood. Those omissions were clerical errors. Clerical errors don't erase patient responses. Elena snapped back. They conceal them. The judge's brow furrowed. Mr. Briggs, did you personally file these medical records? Damon's jaw tightened. I filed the documents provided to me. So you didn't verify them? Elena asked lightly. I trusted the professionals. Except the professionals' notes contradict the documents you submitted. The judge wrote something down. Damon swallowed. Elena moved on. Exhibits flashed onto the courtroom. Screens, transaction logs, financial transfers, property sale documents. With each slide, the picture darkened. Over $240,000 moved out of the joint account while Mr. Cole was incapacitated, she said. The townhouse was sold below market value to a colleague of Mr. Cole's, Mr. Hale, who had no apparent reason to purchase the property at that price, except for personal involvement with Mrs. Cole. Marcus stiffened. Elena continued, voice cool and slicing. We also have text messages between Mrs. Cole and Mr. Hale, she said, holding up printed screenshots the court had approved. Many exchanged during Mr. Cole's hospitalization, some discussing financial decisions. Some, she paused but didn't soften her tone, of a personal nature. Lila's face drained of color. Marcus paled. Damon rose again, voice sharp. Your Honor, these messages are personal and irrelevant. Elena cut him off. They establish motive. The judge held up his hand. They remain. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, trying to school his expression into neutrality, but guilt seeped from him like smoke. Aaron watched, silent, every word stabbed, but this time he didn't bleed. This time he witnessed the truth being stripped down bare in a room where lies couldn't hide behind closed doors. Next came the settlement. Elena approached the center. Your Honor, we request the unsealing of the settlement with Helix Logistics due to inconsistencies suggesting coercion and conflict of interest. Specifically, we have evidence showing Mr. Hale signed as a secondary proxy despite having no legal standing to do so. Murmurs escalated. Marcus sat straighter, indignation flaring. That's ridiculous, he snapped. I was supporting a grieving woman. The company required 2 signatures. The company required the legal proxy. Elena corrected. You were not one, and yet you signed? Marcus glared. I was helping. You were benefiting, Elena said, eyes locked on him. Your promotion came weeks after the settlement. Coincidence. Objection, Damon barked. Overruled, the judge said. Mr. Hale's involvement is relevant. Marcus cursed under his breath. Elena turned to the judge. Your Honor, the circumstantial evidence suggests collusion between Helix Logistics, Mr. Hale, Mr. Briggs, and Mrs. Cole to expedite decisions. Mr. Cole could not contest. Lila finally broke. No one colluded, she cried, standing abruptly. I was alone. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I thought he would die. Aaron finally looked at her, not with love, not with longing, but with the cold clarity of someone who finally understood the difference between helplessness and betrayal. You didn't think, he said softly, about me waking up. Her lip trembled. She sat down. Then Elena made her final move. We also request the court enter into evidence a recovered image of an unknown figure at the crash site. The photograph appeared on the display. The figure in the hoodie, the timestamp, their proximity to Crowley's SUV. Your Honor, this individual was never identified, never included in the official report, and appeared to leave before first responders arrived. The Helix attorneys stiffened instantly. One whispered, How did she get that? The judge leaned forward. Do you have reason to believe the identity is known? Not yet, Elena admitted. But we know the report was altered, and we know Helix has a history of covering for their executives. This missing figure may be connected. The judge considered this long and hard. Then he spoke. I am granting a temporary injunction to freeze all assets transferred under the guardianship and divorce. I am also ordering the unsealing of the settlement agreement for judicial review. Additionally, I am opening an inquiry into the conduct of Mr. Briggs and Mr. Hale due to possible conflicts of interest. The room exploded whispers, gasps, objections, but the judge's gavel slammed down. This court will uncover the truth, he said. Aaron let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His hands trembled not from weakness, but from the overwhelming flood of vindication. Not victory, not yet, but the beginning of it. He glanced at Lila. She was crying silently. Not from love, from fear. Marcus looked like someone who'd been caught in a trap he helped build. Damon's arrogance had turned to sweat, and for the first time since the accident, Aaron felt the ground beneath his feet. He wasn't powerless. He wasn't erased. He was rising. Fallout doesn't happen all at once. It unravels slowly, like a thread pulled from a tightly woven fabric. First a loose strand, then another, until the whole pattern collapses. After the courtroom hearing, everything that had been hidden began tearing open, exposing rot in every corner they tried to bury it. Aaron didn't feel triumph. Not even relief. Only a strange quietness inside him. Like a lake after a storm still turbulent beneath the surface. But calm enough to see reflections clearly, he spent the evening after the hearing alone in his apartment, Kane leaning against the couch, legal documents scattered across the table. Naomi had offered to come by. Elena had told him to rest. But he wanted the silence. He needed to understand that this was real, not a dream, not another hallucination from the coma. The next morning, his phone began buzzing nonstop. The world had noticed. Local news stations reported a developing scandal involving Helix Logistics. Words like cover-up, fraud, and ethical violations flashed across headlines. Images of Crowley appeared on screens, grainy and damning. Alongside the altered accident report Elena had unearthed. The story wasn't national yet, but it was climbing. Fast. Elena called him just after noon, her voice brisk. Helix is in panic mode. Their PR team released a statement claiming there was no wrongdoing. That's not surprising, Aaron murmured. They're scared, she continued. The judge's order to unseal the settlement puts them at real risk, and if we can tie their misconduct to the rushed guardianship filings, this becomes more than a civil case. It becomes criminal, Aaron finished. Yes, Elena said, and people like this don't go down quietly. He already knew that. He could feel the tremors of resistance brewing long before she said the words. But what he didn't expect was how fast the personal fallout would hit. That evening, as he struggled through a set of physical therapy stretches, someone knocked on his apartment door. The sound was timid, uncertain, almost apologetic. He opened it slowly. Lila stood there. Her makeup was gone. Her hair was unstyled. She wore a simple hoodie and jeans clothes that suddenly made her look like a version of herself he'd loved years ago, before ambition and fear twisted her into someone unrecognizable. Aaron, she whispered. Please. I didn't know where else to go. He said nothing. His hand tightened on the cane. Can I come in? She asked. He hesitated before stepping aside. She entered cautiously, as though the apartment itself might accuse her. She looked around, taking in the simplicity of his space. A place built from necessity, not comfort. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. I know, she replied. But everything is falling apart. Damon, Marcus, Helix, they're all turning on each other. They're saying I knew more than I did. Did you? He asked, voice steady. She swallowed. Not everything, I swear. Damon told me the settlement was standard. Marcus said the accident wasn't something worth digging into. They didn't tell me anything about the cover-ups. Aaron studied her carefully. But you signed, you accepted the money. She winced. I was terrified. Medical bills kept piling up. They said I'd lose the house. They said your care would bankrupt me. I was drowning, Aaron. And I didn't have anyone. You had me, he said. She looked at him with a grief that almost felt genuine. You weren't there. His jaw tightened. But I was alive. She nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. I know, and I've been trying to live with that every night since that hearing. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about the ring. The day I left, the way your heartbeat changed when I said goodbye. His chest tightened painfully. So she had noticed that, but she walked away anyway. "Why are you here, Lila?" he asked, voice soft but unyielding. "To apologize, or because you're scared of consequences." She hesitated, and that hesitation answered him more clearly than words. He breathed deeply. "I'm not here to punish you, but I'm not protecting you either." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't expect you to. I just needed to say I'm sorry, even if it doesn't change anything." "It doesn't," he said gently. She nodded, and in that small gesture, he saw something he hadn't expected. The end. Not dramatic, not explosive, just final. She left quietly. No hug, no plea for forgiveness. Just a silent understanding that their story had ended long before she walked out of that hospital room. After she was gone, Aaron sat in the dim light of his living room, letting the silence settle around him. This pain was different from the earlier wounds, sharper, cleaner. Closure didn't heal everything, but it stopped the bleeding. By the next week, the situation intensified. Helix executives faced subpoenas. Crowley was placed under investigation. Internal emails leaked, some showing panic, others showing intent. One message hinted that the spouse has agreed to terms, confirming the settlement discussions began while Aaron was still in critical care. Meanwhile, Damon Briggs was suspended from his firm pending disciplinary review. His face appeared on the local news next to phrases like possible ethics violations and conflict of interest inquiry. But the most surprising consequences hit Marcus. He tried to enter the firm one morning, only to be stopped by security. Someone filmed his outburst, Marcus, shouting about loyalty, about being a scapegoat, and the video spread online. Within hours, his professional reputation imploded. Theo texted Aaron a link to the clip with the message, "He finally fell off the pedestal he built out of your life." Aaron didn't reply. He didn't need to. The courtroom hearing wasn't the end, it was the spark. Investigations spread into every corner of the case. Elena worked tirelessly, gathering statements, pushing motions, negotiating with prosecutors. She kept Aaron updated, but he could tell she was protecting him from the worst parts: the political maneuvering, the legal traps, the pressure from Helix's army of attorneys. One evening, she visited his apartment for a formal update. She sat across from him, her expression calmer than usual. "The judge has decided to void the guardianship," she announced, "which nullifies a large portion of the divorce proceedings. The financial transfers are frozen, and the settlement will officially be reviewed for coercion." Aaron exhaled shakily. "So, what happens now?" "Now," Elena said. "Now the people who built their lives on your disappearance start paying the price." "And me?" he asked quietly. "What do I do?" Elena's expression softened. "You live, and you prepare, because when this goes to trial, you'll be the strongest voice in the room." Later that night, Aaron stood at his window, looking out at Ravensbrook's skyline. The city lights flickered like stars caught between buildings. Everything here had once symbolized ambition to him. Then it symbolized loss. Now, it felt like possibility. He wasn't the man who drove into the storm months ago. He wasn't the man abandoned in a hospital bed. He wasn't the ghost they thought he'd remain. He was something new, something forged from truth and fire, something unbreakable. And as he stood there, Cain at his side, the weight of his past slowly lifting, one truth crystallized inside him. They had gambled on him, never waking up, and losing that bet was going to cost them everything. A full year later, if someone had told Aaron he would walk the length of a city block without a cane, he wouldn't have believed them. He wouldn't have believed he would ever wake up without a panic tightening his chest, or look at his reflection without seeing the hollow-eyed man who'd been left to die. But healing, real healing, was rarely one moment. It was 1,000 small ones, slow, stubborn victories stitched together until they formed a life again. And that morning was one of those victories. He stepped out of his apartment building, the early sunlight spilling across Ravensbrook, like someone had peeled back the sky and let warmth fall through the cracks. He inhaled deeply. His gait wasn't perfect, but it was steady. Some days required a cane, others didn't. Progress wasn't linear, Elena always reminded him. But progress was happening. He walked toward the coffee shop near his place, the one with soft music and quiet corners, where he worked on advocacy articles, pieces meant to help families understand medical rights, guardianship risks, and the legal traps he had fallen into. He had become a volunteer speaker for patient advocacy programs. And though public speaking still made his throat tighten, he pushed through it. Someone out there needed the words he wished he'd heard. He wasn't famous, and he didn't need to be. He just needed to matter again. Inside the cafe, Naomi was already seated at their usual table. She looked up when he approached, offering him a warm smile that softened something deep inside him. Their relationship had unfolded gently, naturally built on honesty instead of desperation, on small truths instead of illusions. She rose and pressed a light kiss to his cheek. "No cane today. Not this morning," he said. "But I'm not making any promises for the afternoon." She laughed softly. "Fair enough." They sat, the quiet hum of the cafe wrapping around them. Naomi pushed a newspaper across the table. "You've seen this?" she asked. He scanned the front page. There, beneath the headline about corporate ethics violations, was a name he knew too well. Nathan Crowley, indicted. Helix Logistics, under federal investigation. Guardianship abuse case triggers national reform discussions. Below that, smaller bullet points. Local attorney Damian Briggs disbarred pending trial. Former project manager Marcus Hale faces civil charges. Aaron let out a slow breath. He remembered the courtroom decisions, the hearings, the months of legal battles that followed, the day the settlement was unsealed. The truth finally spilled into the light. Crowley had a history of hit-and-run incidents. Helix had bribed officials, edited police reports, and coerced vulnerable spouses into silence. Damon had manipulated guardianship filings to fast-track the divorce and the settlement. And Marcus had served as a carefully disguised bridge between corporate self-preservation and personal ambition. None of them walked away unscathed. Leela did not go to prison. The prosecutors acknowledged she had been pressured and emotionally manipulated, but she faced heavy fines, mandatory counseling, and the forfeiture of every dollar she received from the settlement. She moved out of the penthouse long ago, returning to a modest apartment far from the city center. She wrote Aaron a long letter, pages of regret, explanations, and admissions, but he never responded. Not out of hatred, but finality. Some ties needed to remain cut. Naomi watched him quietly, reading the emotions flickering behind his eyes. "How do you feel?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Lighter," he said. "Not happy, just lighter." "That sounds like healing." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it is." They ordered their drinks and sat in comfortable silence. Aaron let his gaze drift across the cafe. A couple laughed at a corner table. A mother soothed her infant near the counter. Life moved in small rhythms, unconcerned with the rise and fall of legal battles or the wreckage left by betrayal. It was strangely comforting. After they finished their drinks, Naomi touched his hand gently. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." They walked together to the riverfront, his favorite spot in the city. Sunlight shimmered over the water, rippling in slow waves that broke against the stone embankment. He paused at the railing, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the world settle around him. "This is where I came after the hearing," he told her softly. "I stood right here and realized for the first time I wasn't afraid anymore." She squeezed his hand. "What about now?" He looked out across the water. "Now, I think I'm finally free." It wasn't freedom from pain. Scars never fully disappeared. It wasn't freedom from memory. Some wounds echoed for a lifetime. But it was freedom from the weight of the past. Freedom from the people who tried to bury him under paperwork, money, and lies. Freedom from the guilt of surviving. A breeze lifted his hair, and the world felt open in a way it hadn't in a long while. Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder. "You deserve this peace, Aaron," He closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words fill him. She was right. He had clawed his way out of darkness, rebuilt himself from the wreckage, and found steady ground again. They walked along the riverbank until dusk. The city lights flickered on, painting a warm glow across the water. Naomi slipped her hand into his. "What now?" she asked. Aaron considered the question. What now? He had spent so much time fighting, first to survive, then to be believed, then to reclaim his life. Now the path stretched ahead, wide and unwritten. "Now," he said slowly, "I live, not for the past, not for revenge, for what's ahead." She smiled, eyes soft. "And what's ahead?" He looked at her, realizing the answer wasn't complicated. Something good. Finally, as the evening deepened, he turned toward the city, the same city that had shattered him, betrayed him, and then given him a chance to rise from the pieces. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't kind, but neither was he, the fragile man who once believed love alone kept a life afloat. Strength wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was choosing to walk forward, even when the past kept reaching back with cold fingers. He had chosen again and again, and finally he felt the reward. When he and Naomi returned to his apartment, he paused at the door, taking in the quiet space he now called home. Not much, but enough. Enough to build from, enough to breathe in. He turned to her one last time before stepping inside. "I'm not who I was," he said softly. "No," she replied, brushing her hand along his cheek. "You're better." And for the first time in a long, long while, he believed it. Life has a way of breaking us open, just to show us what we're truly made of. Aaron's story reminds us that betrayal, loss, and injustice don't define who we become. Our choices afterward do. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves we once believed were gone forever. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to stand again, to trust again, to build a new life, even when the old one collapsed without warning. And the most powerful truth of all, no one can take your worth from you. Not lies, not abandonment, not fear. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What part resonated with you most? And if you enjoy emotional, cinematic stories like this, make sure to subscribe for more. Your support means the world.